The maintenance tunnels beneath the crystalline palace of Draconis Prime were always cold. Jake Harper pulled his jacket tighter as he crawled through the narrow passage, his toolbox scraping against the smooth walls. He had been working on the cooling systems for 3 hours, and his back ached from the cramped position. Jake was just a mechanic, nothing special. He fixed things when they broke, kept the massive palace running smoothly, and tried to stay out of everyone's way. The Scaliath who ruled this world were like dragons from old Earth stories. They had scales that shimmered in colors Jake had never seen before, wings that could block out the sun, and eyes that seemed to look right through a person. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Humans were allowed to work here, but the rules were strict. Never look directly at royalty. Never speak unless spoken to. Never, ever touch them. Jake knew the rules by heart. He followed them carefully because breaking them meant death or worse. The cooling system hummed as Jake replaced the damaged regulator. He wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his readings. Everything looked good. He started packing his tools when suddenly the entire tunnel shook. Red emergency lights flashed along the walls, and a loud alarm screamed through the passage. Jake grabbed his toolbox and started moving back the way he came, but the tunnel behind him began collapsing. Chunks of crystal fell from the ceiling, blocking his path. He had no choice. He had to go forward, deeper into the palace, into places where humans were absolutely forbidden to go. He ran. His boots pounded against the crystal floor as more of the tunnel crumbled behind him. The passage opened into a larger corridor, one lined with glowing stones that pulsed with soft light. Jake knew he was in the royal section now. His heart hammered in his chest. He needed to find another way out before someone saw him. Then he heard voices. Not human voices, but the deep, musical sounds of Scaliath's speech. Jake froze. He looked around frantically and saw an archway to his left. Without thinking, he ducked through it, hoping to hide until the emergency passed. He stumbled into a massive chamber. The ceiling rose high above, covered in constellation patterns that actually moved. The walls were made of clear crystal, showing the twin moons outside. In the center of the room stood several Scaliath, their scales gleaming in shades of gold, silver, and deep purple. They wore elaborate robes that marked them as important, as royal. Jake's blood turned to ice. He had walked straight into the royal family's private chambers. On a raised platform in the middle of the room lay a female Scaliath. She was smaller than the others, and her scales, which should have been bright and colorful, looked dull and dark. Black veins spread across her body like cracks in glass. She was clearly dying. The Scaliath around her did not notice Jake at first. They were focused entirely on the dying female. An older male with deep purple scales and a golden crown spoke in a voice heavy with grief. A female with silver scales held the dying one's hand, tears streaming down her face. A younger male stood with his fists clenched, his whole body shaking with helpless anger. Jake started backing away slowly. He needed to leave before they saw him. But his boot caught on the edge of his toolbox, and he stumbled forward. He threw his hands out to catch himself and landed hard against the raised platform. His bare hand pressed against the dying female's scaled arm. Everything stopped. Golden light exploded from where Jake's skin touched her scales. It was not painful, but it was powerful. The light spread up his arm and down hers, bright enough that Jake had to close his eyes. He felt something flowing out of him, something warm and alive, pouring into the dying Scaliath like water into a dry riverbed. When the light faded, Jake opened his eyes. The entire royal family stood frozen, staring at him in complete shock. The dying female's eyes, which had been closed, were now open. They were the color of emeralds, bright and clear. The black veins on her body were fading, retreating like shadows before sunrise. She took a breath. A real breath, not the shallow, painful gasps from before. Jake snatched his hand back and fell backwards onto the floor. His toolbox clattered beside him. He could not speak, could not move. He had just touched royalty. He had broken the most sacred law of the Scaliath people. The older male with the crown, the king, stared at Jake. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open. Confusion, anger, and something else fought across his face. Hope, maybe, or fear. The silver-scaled female, the queen, made a sound between a gasp and a sob. She looked at her daughter, then at Jake, then back at her daughter. The young male prince had taken a step back, his hand moving toward a weapon at his belt. The dying female, the princess, slowly turned her head to look at Jake. For the first time in months, there was no pain in her expression. She looked confused, wondering what had just happened to her. Jake found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I am sorry." "I did not mean to. The tunnel collapsed." "I got lost. I am so sorry." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound in the chamber was the princess's breathing, steady and strong, so different from the weak gasps of moments before. Jake knew he should run, but his legs would not work. He knew he should explain, but what could he say? He had touched royalty, and somehow, impossibly, he had healed her. The king finally moved, raising one clawed hand. Guards Jake had not even noticed stepped forward from the shadows. The guards did not hurt Jake, but they did not let him go either. They walked him through long hallways filled with beautiful things he barely saw. His mind was still stuck in that moment when golden light had poured from his hands. What had he done? What was he? They brought him to a small room with walls made of pale blue crystal. There was a bed, a table, and a chair. One window showed the garden outside, but Jake could see guards standing beneath it. The door closed behind him with a soft click. He was locked in. Jake sat on the bed and put his head in his hands. He had touched the princess. He had seen her dying, seen those black veins spreading through her body like poison, and somehow when he touched her, something inside him had responded. The light had come from him, through him, into her. He waited for hours. Nobody came. He paced the room, looked out the window, sat down, stood up, paced again. What would they do to him? Execute him? Throw him off the planet? He thought about his sister back on Earth, about his small apartment in the human section of the city, about the simple life he had built here. Finally, the door opened. A human woman walked in, carrying a medical scanner. She was older than Jake, maybe 50, with gray streaks in her dark hair and kind eyes behind her glasses. She wore the uniform of a medical liaison, someone who worked between human and Scaliath health services. "My name is Dr. Lydia Grant," she said quietly. "I need to examine you, Jake. Is that okay?" Jake nodded, too tired to argue. Lydia moved the scanner over his body, checking readings on her tablet. She asked him questions about his health, his family history. When he first came to Draconis Prime, Jake answered everything honestly. What was the point of lying now? "Have you ever healed anyone before?" Lydia asked, not looking up from her tablet.
"No, I fix machines, not people."
"I do not even understand what happened." Lydia was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down across from Jake and showed him her tablet screen. It displayed his genetic code, but parts of it were highlighted in bright red. "You have something rare, Jake. Very rare. About 1 in 10 million humans have this genetic marker. We call it a biorestorative sequence. Your body produces a type of energy that can heal cellular damage in certain species." Jake stared at the screen. "I do not understand. Think of it like this. The Scaliath suffer from a type of cellular decay that their medicine cannot fix. It is like rust on metal, slowly spreading and destroying healthy tissue. Your body produces something like an anti-rust coating. When you touched the princess, your energy flowed into her and started repairing the damage. But I never knew I could do this. Why did it happen now? Lydia smiled sadly. Because you never touched a dying Skeleath before. The ability activates when it senses specific types of cellular decay. It is automatic, like breathing. Before Jake could respond, the door opened again. This time, royal physicians entered. They were Skeleath, tall and imposing, their scales gleaming in shades of blue and green. They examined Jake with instruments he did not recognize, speaking to each other in their musical language. Lydia translated when necessary, but mostly they worked in silence. When they finished, they left without saying a word to Jake. Lydia stayed behind, looking worried.
What will happen to me?
Jake asked.
I do not know. The Royal Council is meeting now.
They are debating what to do. You broke an ancient law, but you also saved the princess's life. Some want you executed. Some want you rewarded.
Nobody can agree.
That night,
Jake could not sleep.
he lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, watching the crystal slowly change colors as the moons moved across the sky. A sound at the door made him sit up. It opened slowly, quietly. A figure in a hooded cloak slipped inside. When she lowered the hood, Jake saw silver scales and eyes filled with desperation. The Queen. Jake jumped to his feet and bowed, not knowing what else to do. The Queen raised a hand to stop him. "Please," she said in perfect but accented English. "Please, sit."
I should not be here. If the guards knew I came, it would cause problems.
But I had to see you. Jake sat back down slowly. The Queen remained standing, her hands clasped together. In the soft light, he could see she had been crying. "My daughter is better," the Queen said. "For the first time in 6 months, she is not in pain. She ate dinner tonight." She smiled. I had forgotten what her smile looked like. Jake did not know what to say.
I am glad she is better. The physicians say she is not fully healed. The poison in her body is retreating, but it is still there.
She needs more treatments. Many more. Maybe months of them. The Queen's voice broke slightly.
But the law says you cannot touch her again. The council is split. My husband, the king, does not know what to do.
He wants to save our daughter, but he also must uphold our laws. The Queen came closer and knelt down, so she was eye level with Jake. Tears ran down her silver-scaled face. "I am begging you. Help my daughter. I will give you anything. Money, land, a title, a ship of your own. Name it, and it is yours. Just please, please help her live." Jake looked at this powerful being, this queen who ruled worlds, kneeling before him and begging. He thought about the princess lying on that platform, those black veins spreading through her body. He thought about how the light had felt, warm and right, flowing from him to her.
I will help her, Jake said quietly.
You do not have to give me anything. She needs help.
That is enough reason.
The Queen stared at him like he had spoken in a language she did not understand. You want nothing? I want her to live. Is that not what matters? The Queen reached out slowly and touched Jake's hand. Not a healing touch, just the gesture of one grateful person to another. Then she stood, pulled her hood back up, and left as quietly as she had come. Jake sat alone in the blue crystal room and wondered what he had just agreed to. The next morning, guards came for Jake. They were polite but firm, leading him through different hallways than before. These corridors were warmer, filled with morning light that filtered through the crystal walls in patterns like rainbows. They stopped at a large door, carved with images of stars and moons. Inside was the princess's recovery chamber. It was smaller than the room where Jake had first seen her, more comfortable. The walls showed garden scenes that moved gently in an artificial breeze. The princess lay on a cushioned platform that adjusted to support her body. She looked much better than before, but Jake could still see faint traces of those black veins beneath her scales. 6 guards stood around the room. They watched Jake like he was a dangerous animal. Dr. Lydia was there too, along with 2 Scalia physicians. And in the corner, arms crossed and eyes suspicious, stood a young male Scalia with scales the color of deep ocean water. He wore royal markings. The prince. "Come forward," one of the physicians said in English. "You may approach the princess. But remember, we are watching. Any wrong move and the guards will act." Jake walked slowly to the platform. The princess watched him with those bright green eyes. She looked curious, not afraid. "Hello," Jake said awkwardly.
"How are you feeling?" "Better than I have felt in months," the princess replied.
Her voice was soft and musical. "You are the human who touched me. The one who made the light." "Yes." "I am Jake. I am sorry I broke the law." "I did not mean to enter your chamber. I know." "I heard you explaining to the guards. The tunnel collapsed." She smiled slightly. "You have very bad timing." Despite everything, Jake almost laughed. A dying princess making jokes. I have been told that before. "My name is Zarathor. Since you saved my life, I think we can skip the formal titles." Lydia stepped forward with her scanner. "We should begin. Jake, place your hand on her arm, just like before. Let the energy flow naturally. Do not force it." Jake reached out slowly. His hand hovered over Zarathor's scaled arm. He could feel the guards tensing, ready to grab him if needed. Then he touched her skin. The golden light came again, but gentler this time. It was not the explosion from before, but a steady flow, like a stream of warm water. Jake felt that same sensation, something flowing out of him and into her. The black veins under her scales faded a little more. After 10 minutes, Lydia told him to stop. Jake pulled his hand back, feeling tired but not exhausted. Zarathor took a deep breath and sat up straighter than she had been able to before. "That is amazing," she said quietly. This became their routine. Every morning Jake came to the chamber. He would talk with Zarathor for a few minutes, then provide the healing treatment while doctors monitored everything. The guards slowly relaxed, seeing that Jake meant no harm. Even the prince, whose name was Kaelron, stopped glaring quite so intensely. After the first week, Zarathor started asking Jake questions. Where was he from? What was Earth like? Why did he become a mechanic? Jake told her about growing up in Nevada, about the desert and mountains. He explained how he loved taking things apart and putting them back together, figuring out how they worked. He talked about coming to Draconis Prime 5 years ago, looking for adventure and finding a simple job instead. "You seem happy with a simple life," Zarathor observed. "Most beings want more. Power, wealth, fame. Those things do not fix broken pipes," Jake said with a shrug. "And they do not make the sunset prettier. I like my life. I help keep things running. That matters." Zarathor looked at him thoughtfully. "You are strange, Jake Harper. I have been told that too." As days passed, they talked more. Zarathar told Jake about royal life, about the loneliness of it. Everyone who approached her wanted something. An alliance, a favor, access to power. Nobody just wanted to know her as a person. "Except you," she said during the second week.
You have asked for nothing. Mother said she offered you anything you wanted, and you refused. I do not need anything, Jake replied.
"You needed help. That is different. But why?" "You do not know me. We are not even the same species." Jake thought about that while his hand glowed against her arm.
My dad used to say that kindness does not need a reason.
If someone is hurt and you can help, you help. It does not matter who they are or what they can give you back. It just matters that they need help and you can provide it. Zarathor was quiet for a long time.
Your father sounds wise.
He was.
He died 3 years ago, but I still hear his voice sometimes telling me the right thing to do.
Prince Kelron, who had been listening from his corner, spoke for the first time in days. "This is how all humans think." Jake looked at him. Some do, some do not.
We are like any species, I think. Some good, some bad, most trying their best.
Kelron nodded slowly and said nothing more, but his expression had changed. The suspicion was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect. By the third week, Zarathor could stand and walk around the chamber. The black veins were almost completely gone. She showed Jake her collection of star charts, ancient maps of space that her ancestors had made. She taught him a few words in her language, laughing when he mispronounced them. One afternoon, she asked Jake about human music. He tried to explain Earth songs, but words were not enough, so he started humming a simple melody his mother used to sing. It was an old lullaby, gentle and sweet. Zarathora listened with her eyes closed, a smile on her face. When Jake finished, she opened her eyes. That was beautiful. We have songs too, but they are always about war or glory. That song was about peace. My mom sang it when I was scared. It always helped.
Sing it again? Zarathar asked quietly. So Jake did.
And he did not notice that even the guards had stopped to listen, or that Prince Kaelron had moved closer, or that Dr. Lydia was smiling. But outside the chamber, in the darker halls of the palace, other Scaliath were meeting in secret. They did not smile. They spoke in angry whispers about contamination, about broken laws, about a human who had touched royalty and must pay the price. The explosion happened at dawn. Jake woke to the sound of alarms and screaming. He rushed to his window and saw smoke rising from the human residential sector on the far side of the city. His heart dropped. That was where the other human workers lived. His friends lived there. Guards burst into his room. "You must come with us now."
Hi!
The princess's chamber is the safest place. They rushed him through the halls. Jake's mind raced. Why would someone attack the human sector? They had done nothing wrong. They just worked here, lived their simple lives, stayed out of the way. When he reached Zarathor's chamber, she was already standing, looking out her window at the smoke. Her face was tight with anger. Prince Kelron stood beside her, and the king and queen had just arrived.
3 buildings damaged, Kelron reported.
No deaths yet, but many injured. Both humans and Scaliath who lived nearby.
Who did this? The king demanded.
We are still investigating, but witnesses saw Scaliath in noble house colors near the site before the explosion. The queen looked at Jake with horror. They are targeting humans because of you. Because you helped Zarathor. Jake felt sick. People were hurt because of him, because he had tried to help. Over the next few days, things got worse. Messages appeared on walls throughout the city, painted in angry red symbols. They said humans were contaminating royal purity. They said Jake was poison, that his touch would destroy Scalaeth culture. Some demanded his execution. Others demanded all humans be expelled from the planet. A noble named Lord Vexmore led the angry faction. He was old, powerful, and spoke with a voice that made others listen. He gave speeches in the city squares about tradition and sacred laws. Crowds gathered to hear him. Some cheered, some threw stones at human homes. Jake stopped going to treat Zarathor. He told the guards it was too dangerous, that his presence was causing too much trouble. But on the third day, Zarathor herself came to his chamber. "You are not stopping now," she said firmly. "I am not fully healed. I still need treatment, and I will not let angry fools decide what happens in my own life." "People are getting hurt because of me," Jake said quietly. "People are getting hurt because some Scalaeth are cowards who hide behind old laws instead of facing change." Zarathor's eyes flashed with anger. "Do you know why we have laws against touching?" "Because centuries ago, our ancestors feared outsiders. They made rules to keep us separate, to keep us pure. But those rules are chains now. They prevent us from growing, from learning, from being better." Jake looked at her. She was standing straighter now, stronger. The treatments had worked. She looked like the powerful princess she was supposed to be. "Come," she said. "Today we go before the Royal Assembly. I will speak."
And you will be there. The Royal Assembly Chamber was enormous.
Hundreds of Scalaeth nobles sat in curved rows that rose up like an amphitheater. At the center was a platform where the king sat on his throne. The queen sat beside him, and Prince Kael'ran stood behind them. Guards lined the walls. Lord Vexmore was already speaking when Zarathor entered with Jake. The old noble's voice echoed through the chamber. "This human has violated our most sacred law. Yes, he helped the princess, but at what cost? Our traditions crumble. Our young people question everything. Humans grow bold and think themselves our equals. This cannot stand." Many nobles nodded in agreement. Some shouted their support. Zarathor walked to the center platform. Jake followed, feeling hundreds of eyes on him. Most were hostile. Some were curious. A few looked sympathetic. "I wish to speak," Zarathor announced. Her voice was clear and strong. Lord Vexmore glared at her. "Princess, you are not scheduled to address the assembly today. I am addressing it anyway. This concerns my life." "I have the right to speak." The king nodded. "Let my daughter speak." Zarathor turned to face the assembly. "You say this human violated sacred law. You are correct. He touched me. But you know what else he did? He saved my life when I was dying. When your physicians could do nothing, when your prayers accomplished nothing, when I lay in agony for months, this human touched me, and I began to heal." She walked along the platform, looking at the nobles. "You talk about tradition and purity. But what good are traditions if they require us to watch someone die when we could save them? What kind of purity demands suffering?" Lord Vexmore stood. "These laws protect us. They keep us strong, keep us Scalaeth." "No," Zarathor said sharply. "These laws keep us afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of anything different. Afraid of admitting that maybe, just maybe, we do not have all the answers." She turned to face Lord Vexmore directly.
"And there is something else you should all know."
"I was not sick by accident. I was poisoned." Someone deliberately gave me stellar toxin knowing it would kill me slowly. Gasps filled the chamber. Even the king stood up from his throne. "What are you saying?" the king demanded. "I am saying someone in this court wanted me dead. The physicians found traces of the poison in my food 6 months ago, right before I got sick. They have been investigating quietly, and Jake's healing exposed something. The poison was specifically designed to look like natural cellular decay, but when Jake's energy pushed it back, the physicians could see it clearly. It was not natural. It was murder." Prince Calron stepped forward. "The investigation is complete. We know who did it." He looked directly at Lord Vexmore. "Your sister, Lady Vexer, has confessed. She poisoned our sister's food repeatedly over months. She thought if Zarathor died, your family line would be elevated. You would gain more power." Lord Vexmore's face went pale. Around the chamber, nobles were standing, shouting questions. Some looked horrified. Others looked afraid. The king's voice boomed across the chaos. "Arrest Lord Vexmore and all of his house!"
They will be questioned. As guards moved forward, Lord Vexmore shouted, "This is a lie!"
A trick to protect the human. But nobody was listening to him anymore. The trial lasted 3 days. Lady Vexia, when faced with the evidence, admitted everything. She had poisoned Princess Zarathor slowly, carefully, making it look like a natural illness. She had planned for the princess to die, clearing a path for her own family to gain influence over the younger Prince Calron. Lord Vexmore claimed he knew nothing, but messages found in his private chambers told a different story. He had known. He had encouraged it. The court found them both guilty. They would spend the rest of their lives in exile on a remote moon, stripped of titles, wealth, and honor. For Scaliath, it was a fate worse than death. But the trial revealed something more important. When the king's investigators dug deeper, they found that dozens of nobles had known about the plot, or suspected it. They had said nothing, some because they feared Lord Vexmore's power, some because they agreed that Zarathor was too progressive, too willing to change old ways, some simply because they did not care enough to act. The king stood before his people in the Grand Plaza, with thousands of Scaliath and hundreds of humans gathered to hear him speak. Jake stood on the platform beside the royal family, uncomfortable with the attention but unable to refuse the king's request. "My daughter nearly died," the king said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "She suffered for months while poison slowly killed her, and many of you knew something was wrong but did nothing. You hid behind tradition, behind fear, behind comfort. You let old laws become excuses for inaction." He looked at Jake, then a human, a simple mechanic who was forbidden to even look at royalty, broke our most sacred law. He touched my daughter, and he saved her life. He asked for nothing in return. He expected no reward. He simply saw someone suffering and helped because it was the right thing to do. The king turned back to the crowd. "This cannot continue. Laws that prevent compassion are not laws worth keeping. Traditions that allow evil to hide are not traditions worth preserving. Today I announce the Healing Accord. Humans and Scaliath will exchange medical knowledge. We will study together, learn together, help each other. Our species will no longer be separate by law, but united by choice." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, beings began to cheer. Not everyone. Some walked away in anger. But most stayed, and most cheered. Change was frightening, but watching a princess nearly die because of old fears had been more frightening. After the ceremony, the king called Jake to his private office. It was a smaller room than Jake expected, filled with books and star charts. The king sat behind a simple desk and gestured for Jake to sit. "I want to give you a position in the royal court," the king said. "Advisor of cultural exchange. You would have wealth, power, a voice in decisions that affect millions.
Jake sat quietly for a moment, then shook his head. Thank you, Your Majesty, but no. I am not the right person for that.
I am just a mechanic. I fix broken things.
I do not know how to advise kings or change cultures.
The king smiled. You changed my daughter's life. You changed mine.
You changed how this entire planet thinks about humans and Scalith. And you did it by simply being kind.
That seems like exactly the right person to me. I am honored, truly. But I would rather go back to my work. There are cooling systems that need maintenance, generators that need repairs.
That is what I am good at. That is what makes me happy.
The king studied Jake for a long moment, then nodded.
I understand, but know that my offer stands.
If you ever change your mind, the position is yours. As Jake stood to leave, the king added, My daughter wishes to speak with you. She is in the East Garden. Jake found Zarathor sitting on a bench beneath a tree, with silver leaves that chimed softly in the breeze. She looked completely healthy now. The black veins were gone. Her scales shimmered in shades of emerald and gold. She was beautiful and strong, every bit the princess she was meant to be. My father offered you a position, she said as Jake approached. He did. I said no. I thought you might. She patted the bench beside her. Sit with me? Jake sat. They were quiet for a moment, just listening to the wind and the silver leaves.
I want you to stay, Zarathor said softly. Not as an advisor or a court official, just as my friend. I have realized something over these past weeks.
Everyone in my life wants something from me. They see the princess, the position, the power. But you just saw someone who needed help. You treated me like a person, not a title. You are a person? Jake said simply. Exactly. And I would like to keep knowing someone who remembers that. She looked at him with those bright green eyes. I am going to be the ambassador for the Healing Accord.
I will travel to human worlds, meet your leaders, help build bridges between our species. I want you to come with me.
Not as my servant or my advisor, but as my friend. Someone who can show others what cooperation really looks like. Jake thought about his small apartment, his maintenance job, his simple life. Then he thought about Zarathor lying on that platform, dying because ancient fears were more important than her life. He thought about the explosion in the human sector, about how fear and hatred had hurt innocent people. Okay, he said. I will come, but I am not giving speeches or attending fancy ceremonies if I can help it. Zarathor laughed, a sound like music. Deal. You can stay in the background and fix things when they break. That is what you are good at, right? Right. 2 months later, in a facility that had once been a simple maintenance building, Jake stood with a group of young Scaliath and humans. They gathered around a broken generator, its parts spread across a work table. The generator had powered a water purification system for a mixed neighborhood, and when it failed, both species had worked together to bring it here for repair. Okay, Jake said, pointing to the core assembly. See this connection here? It is corroded. That is what caused the failure. Now, fixing it requires patience. You cannot rush. You have to clean each contact carefully, replace the damaged parts one at a time, and test everything before you put it back together. A young Scaliath named Toresh raised his hand. What if we mess up? Then you try again, Jake said with a smile. That is the thing about fixing broken things. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you have to take it apart and start over. But you keep trying until it works. Because everything deserves a chance to work again. Machines, systems, friendships between species. Everything. Zarathar watched from the doorway, Prince Kael'ron beside her. The prince had become one of the strongest supporters of the Healing Accord, using his influence to convince skeptical nobles that change was necessary. He makes it look so simple, Kael'ron observed.
Because for him it is simple, Zarathar replied. See a problem? Fix it.
See someone hurting, help them. No politics, no games, no hidden motives, just kindness. We could learn from that. We are learning from that. In the workroom, the generator suddenly hummed to life. The young students cheered, both Skaliev and human voices mixing together in celebration. Jake smiled and showed them how to properly seal the housing so the repair would last. Outside, through the window, the twin moons were rising over Draconis Prime. In the streets below, beings of two different species walked together, talked together, lived together. The change was not complete. There were still those who resisted, who clung to the old ways. But the change had begun. And it had all started with a mechanic who got lost in a tunnel, stumbled into a royal chamber, and accidentally touched a dying princess. Sometimes the most important moments in history begin with simple kindness. Sometimes fixing what is broken, whether a machine or a relationship between worlds, just requires patience, gentleness, and the belief that everything deserves a chance to work again. Jake Harper believed that. And because he did, so did many others. The story of the human who healed a princess would be told for generations. But Jake would always say it was not really about healing or breaking laws or changing traditions. It was simply about seeing someone who needed help and deciding that mattered more than anything else. That, he would say, was something anyone could do. All it required was caring enough to try.